Hey everybody, welcome back to Vegas Weekly for Saturday, June the 4th, 2022. Got an interesting show for you today, I think. I'm going to introduce you to another new Las Vegas themed YouTube channel. Got a couple of news stories we're going to cover here in a minute. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about a Vegas phenomenon that has kind of come and gone, but it's still with us. First of all, I wanted to apologize again. We did not do a podcast this week. We did not have a Tuesday show, but we will be back full strength next week with our normal lineup. Also wanted to update everyone. You may be wondering, what's happened to the fancy show? I was promised a fancy show. Well, the fancy show will be Saturday, June the 25th, 3 weeks from now. It probably won't be very topically themed. We'll probably do some kind of a countdown. We'll intersperse some clips. We'll have a little bit of fun with that. So look forward to that in 3 weeks. That'll be like a couple of days before our monthly live stream. That's going to be a busy week. Speaking of busy, let's get into our news stories for the week. If you were hoping, maybe, that prices would begin dropping in Las Vegas, you'd start to see cheaper room rates and more and cheaper flights. It's not looking too good for you right now. Of course, it's looking good for Las Vegas. The reports were that Las Vegas was probably the most popular travel destination for people traveling over the Memorial Day holiday. I can certainly speak from experience that holiday weekends, particularly those extended weekends, have been very pricey and are likely to continue to be so. So 4th of July is actually on a Monday this year, so that's going to be a pretty crazy week. And then obviously you get into Memorial Day. Now typically you get into the real heat of the summer, particularly the month of July, and you start to see a lot of really great deals. I've yet to see a lot of really great deals. If you have, let me know in the show notes below, or in the comments below. So it could be a pricey week, so maybe you want to check out those old Vegas tips and tricks to make sure that you get the best deal you can get. You know, one reason so many people come to Las Vegas and have for nearly a century is to get married. Vegas is more or less the wedding capital of the world, and if there's any wedding in Las Vegas, it seems more sort of appropriate and yet wildly inappropriate at the same time. It's getting married by Elvis. Well, I hope you got that done, because the company which controls the name, image, likeness of Elvis Presley recently sent out cease and desist letters basically telling wedding chapels, don't have anybody dressed up like Elvis, pretending to be Elvis, marrying people, because that's our business, and you're basically stealing our business. This seems so incredibly short-sighted, I can't even begin to comment on it, but clearly it's going to hurt business at some of these places. I guess you could still find a sort of renegade minister who would dress up as Elvis for you, but don't let the authorities find out, or you could be in some serious trouble. Strange, but true. Okay, well, before we get into sort of the main story of the day, I, of course, wanted to introduce you to a new YouTube channel. And I find these YouTube channels in various ways. Many of them are ones that I was aware of and simply not spent a lot of time checking out. I've had a number of friends suggest people to me that I have then checked out. This week's channel, I really actually just found it by searching on YouTube. It's amazing how useful that feature can be. Just looking for people that maybe just starting out, a few hundred subscribers who were doing some good content. And thankfully, I found someone, or actually I found a lovely couple from the UK. So without any further ado, I want to introduce you to Sophie and Phil of Peels on Meals. These folks have done a lot of Vegas content lately. I don't know that they would define their channel as just Vegas, but for the past 6-7 months, it's been just Vegas and a lot of it. They've made a couple of trips to Vegas, pretty lengthy trips to Vegas. Their channel tends to focus on food, but they definitely talk about other things. You get to see other things. So to me, it's very much worth your while. So check it out. As always, I'll put a link in the notes below. If you check out their channel, let them know that Vegas Tips and Tricks sent them, or don't. It's really up to you. But I think it's definitely worthwhile. Okay, so today's show is called All In, and that's because we're going to talk about poker. And the reason we're going to talk about poker, I'm not going to teach you how to play because I'm not very good. Used to play with some friends, and I don't have a poker face, and so I lose badly when I lose, and I win little when I win. So I know some good channels out there. Obviously, people always think of the Trooper, who plays poker more or less professionally, I guess. But I want to talk about poker because this week was the start of the World Series of Poker, which this year, for the first time, I believe the first time ever, is actually being held on the Las Vegas Strip at the little convention center that's between Bally's and Paris. If you've ever walked between the two, or if you've ever parked in the parking garage, it's very close to that area. I think pretty much all the events are going to be held there. Maybe they'll, I don't know, do the final table somewhere else, but been nearly 15 years, I think about 15 years, that it's been at the Rio. That property obviously is changing hands, so this will make it much more accessible. I don't know the kind of entries we've seen, and obviously this event goes through July, so there's probably still events that you could enter if you'd like. There's, of course, a huge list if you just go to like WSOP.com or something like that. But again, the purpose of today's little discussion is not so much to teach you about poker or encourage you to play poker or anything of the sort, but talk about the phenomenon of poker in Las Vegas and what has happened to it. And, of course, poker's been around forever. It's one of the original gambling games. You always think about the Old West, or you think about, dogs smoking cigars and playing poker on a little velvet canvas or something. And in recent years, when I say recent, the last 25 years, poker had a big resurgence in this country and a big resurgence in Las Vegas. I want to talk a little bit about why that happened and probably why it has kind of become less popular again. There's been coverage, at least, of the World Series of Poker for quite some time. I know ESPN showed sort of tape-delayed, heavily edited versions of it for many years, and I think they still have the rights to that. But in the late 90s, someone developed the technology which now has become more or less ubiquitous, fancy word, of the whole card cam, where you could more or less live, I'm sure there's a tape delay of at least a few minutes, but could watch the game through the eyes of the player, or more or less through the eyes of God, I guess, because you could see what all the players had and whether they were making terrible choices or whether they were going to get very lucky. And it created a lot more drama. Like I said, it was first introduced, I believe, 25 years ago, 1997, overseas. I don't believe it made its way to the U.S. till about 2001, 2002. At the same time this was happening, you also had so much new time to fill on various cable channels. There's been an explosion of channels who need content, sports channels that need content. And whether you think of poker as a sport or not, it appealed to a lot of the same people who would have watched sports. There was also an NHL lockout that came about the mid-2000s. So there was a place there for at least some poker content, but I think people had to have been surprised how much poker content there was. There was also a lot of people playing poker online, particularly for a few years when it was more or less the wild, wild west out there, where it was, well, basically legal, and then it wasn't legal anymore, and well, it's kind of in a limbo status at this point. But it was an opportunity out there for people to go online and gamble, which people love that. They don't even have to leave their home. And finally, you had an event which kind of brought all of those things together and convinced people that maybe they should play poker. And it seemed like for a while everybody did. A number of these online gambling sites would have essentially little tournaments of their own where you could win your way into the field of the sort of main event of the World Series of Poker. And in 2003, a gentleman by the name of Chris Moneymaker got one of those free spots by winning a tournament online. And against all odds, the man with the perfect name for gambling won the whole thing. I think about my own favorite sport of basketball and who the sort of most influential person in basketball is. And you might say, oh, well, it's LeBron James or, going back, Michael Jordan, people like that. And I really think in a lot of ways the most influential guy in basketball, at least over the last 10 years or so, has been Steph Curry. The reason I say that is you watch Steph Curry on the basketball cover, he looks like a guy you probably played in high school with. He's actually much bigger, stronger, faster than you think he is, but he looks so wiry. He doesn't look like other guys. If you're a 9 or a 10-year-old, or maybe even if you're a 20-year-old, and you watch him play, you're like, hey, I'm about that size. I could do that. And when you see a guy that wins a seat at the World Series of Poker in an online tournament win the whole thing, you think to yourself, well, hey, I'm going to start playing this poker. I could win too. And people did. And the event grew and grew. And we saw more and more television coverage of poker. We had the World Poker Tour. You had Poker After Dark. These people who were regulars, who were charismatic, who were known all over the gambling world and all over Las Vegas suddenly became international superstars. Everybody knew who Phil Hellmuth is and still does. But there was a whole cast of characters, and you watched these shows almost like a weekly drama to see what characters would pop up this week and what might happen. And again, the event grew and grew and grew, and there was so much demand to play poker. People were doing it online. As I said, I had some friends. We did it, for a while. We were having like a Wednesday night poker game. People wanted to play it in the casino. They wanted to play the game they saw on TV, which was primarily Texas Hold'em. And so everywhere opened up poker rooms. And trust me, the casinos didn't want to open up poker rooms because, first of all, they take up a lot of space. Although some places basically tucked 3 tables in a corner and called it a poker room. They require labor, dealers, unlike slot machines, who never need breaks or, never call in sick. But there was so much demand for this that they had to provide it. And there were poker rooms everywhere, and the huge poker rooms in places like Bellagio or Venetian or Caesars became a mecca of places. And you could go and you might play with Phil Ivey. It could happen. It did. So it became a phenomenon, and, like most phenomenon, it began to fade over time. And now, over the past few years, we have seen more and more poker rooms close, and fewer and fewer people playing the game, which just a few years earlier, at least a decade earlier or so, was like the thing to do. Everybody entered their $50 no-limit poker tournament so that they could play just like the superstars on TV. So, hey, maybe poker will come back. Maybe its presence on the Las Vegas Strip proper will encourage more people to play. But so I'd talk a little bit about that today. And what do you think about poker? What do you think about banning Elvis? What do you think about Vegas this summer? Let me know in the comments below. And we'll be back again next week with another episode of Vegas Weekly. Until then, hope you have a great, lucky, and healthy week. We'll see you all again real soon. Bye-bye.